Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.
Hello, this is Malcolm Robinson and you're listening to the Paranormal UK radio network, the UK's biggest paranormal network, and this is Paranormal Dimensions with David Young.
Hello, welcome to another show. Thanks for that, Malcolm. Okay, now before we get into the show, we've got some call-outs for John Vescharo of Bergamo, Italy, Corinne Medson of Geneva, Ohio, USA, and Martina Catalano of Oldham, UK. Okay, now today's guest is Paul Ascough. He's a ufologist, and I think he delves in other types of paranormal, and we'll soon find out. So anyway, I'll introduce you now to Paul Ascough. Hello, Paul. Welcome to the show.
Good evening. Thank you.
Hello, and
lovely to be here.
I must report to everyone, Paul's sunning it up in Florida at the moment. He's a British subject, but he's out there. When the show goes out, I think you'll be back. But Paul's sunning it up in Florida while we're all getting soaked at the moment. Well, so I'm sure you feel bad for everyone, don't you, Paul?
Oh, terribly.
Anyway,
it's been 90 degrees, but anyway, there you go. That's enough for Florida.
Yeah, don't rub it in. Anyway, I mean, I understand you've been into ufology for a number of years, Paul. How did you get into it?
Right, I wasn't interested as a child. I got into it. Nothing, as a child I was a very Victorian upbringing. My father was very strict. I'm not saying he was cruel or anything, but when he said jump, you jumped, you know. And I'm sure a lot of us of my age had a similar upbringing.
Yeah.
And we all, as children, we all had duties, jobs to do. And our last job of the day was taking our dog for a walk and the neighbour's dog for a walk. And our neighbour was a disabled veteran, only had one lung. So it was a bit of a duty thing. We didn't like doing it, but it was myself and my younger brother. We'd been out and we lived on the edge of a small village, so literally out of our front garden, as it were, you walked over a track and then you were straight into fields. So we always had a good view of the night sky. Now, I'm talking late 1960s here, so as you can imagine, there wasn't apart from the population and the building that's been going on recently, because of where we were in a very rural location, we had excellent vision of the night sky. We'd take the dogs for a walk and come back, and it was just getting dark, end of August, beginning of September, or thereabouts. And my father he used to like gardening, used to like doing his roses, and he was in the front garden, so we dutifully put the dogs away, went to say good night, and we were sat on either side of him in the front of the house, looking due east. It was twilight, and to the north, the sky was covered in cloud, thick cloud. But to the south, like almost in a straight line in front of us, it was clear. So from our viewpoint, everything to the right was clear, and everything to the left was cloudy. But the first few stars had started to come out in the night sky, and my father's saying, what's this and what's that? And as children, we weren't particularly interested. But we used to just do it like you did to appease your parents. And as we're looking at the sky, all the three of us, 2 UFOs came together out of the bank of cloud and then just stopped dead. I mean, they were moving quite rapidly. If you can imagine a V formation of 3, but one of them was missing. So one of them was slightly to one side and slightly behind the other. But they stayed throughout the sighting. They stayed in that position relative to each other. It never moved. So although you could argue that they were some connection, that they were fastened together or whatever, they didn't appear to be. They did appear as two complete separate spheres. They were sort of a pearly white almost. If you can imagine it, a brilliant, really bright pearly white, perfect, and they came out and then they stopped dead, and you could actually see the light off them shining on the cloud. And all three of us were sort of awestruck, and nobody said anything, but we just sort of sat there with our mouths open. And they were stationary for maybe a few seconds, and then immediately they moved away due east in a 90 degree from where they first came out the cloud. And again, there was no acceleration, no noise, no flashing lights, no obvious rotation, no anything. But staying relative to each other, they were immediately moving quickly away from us in a due easterly direction. And as you could see where sort of the cloud was undulating along the edges and they got closer and further away, when they got closer you could see again the light from them shining onto the cloud. And also when they moved, it was the weirdest little sort of teardrop shape at the back, like a very tiny teardrop. So there was a ball with this funny little point at the back of it that was the sort of left behind as they moved away from us. And throughout there was no noise whatsoever, and they moved, obviously, completely stationary or moving very quickly. And they stayed in the same trajectory, going due east away from us. In those days, they were sort of going towards the east coast, I would say quite due south, sort of above Hull, maybe the Bridlington, south of Bridlington, that sort of area.
There's a lot of activity around there, isn't there, even now?
Yeah, there is, yeah. And until they just faded in the distance and we couldn't see anymore. And all three of us were just sat there and nobody said anything. And then after they'd gone, my father just said, well, there's nothing we've got that can do that.
And they stayed the same colours. The colours didn't change or anything?
No, nothing changed whatsoever, apart from this minute little tail that appeared out the back when they were actually moving. But the thing that I've said to people, and I've said to many other people, how do you know when you've seen something that strange? How do you know when you've seen a UFO even? And to me, there's UFOs all the time because people misinterpret aircraft, they misinterpret the planets and meteors and all that sort of thing. But when you see something that obvious, it's immediately obvious that it's not of this earth. Now, by that I don't mean it's definitely, I'm not going to go along with the ETH hypothesis, it's not definitely from another planet, but it definitely wasn't man-made. Something else.
Sorry, go on. Go on. I was going to suggest that there always seems to come up on this show, and that's why I called it Paranormal Dimensions, that things could be coming from another dimension. You know, I think you've got to accept that, and I think science has accepted that now. Is it that there are other dimensions that?
Well, one of the things that happened as well, and I believe is quite common within different people I've spoken to over the years I've been doing this, is immediately they came out of the cloud and then was stationary. I got sort of a telepathic message in my head that they hadn't meant to be seen. Now I asked my brother, and he didn't. He said he was just dumbfounded at the two bright white lights in the sky. But I got this, it was almost like we shouldn't have come out of the cloud, we didn't mean to be seen type of thing. And I got that in my head. And I mean, even now, after, over 50 years, I can still remember that, how clear it was.
I don't think it was your own mind conjuring that up itself, or...
No, I mean, this was totally out of the blue, totally unexpected. I mean, I have to admit I was an avid reader, but I suppose along Malcolm's lines I was more into ghost stories and children's adventure things. So things like science fiction and UFOs hadn't really come into my envelope, if you like, at that time.
No, but I think these well, I'm going to call them things, as I want for a better word. I think they know that your mind is open, don't they? And to that type of thing. So I think it's I think that's why they do communicate that in that. I mean, I've heard this sort of thing before. You know, that they speak telepathically to people. But I mean, you just got to accept that at face value, haven't you? If that's what you think it was, then you know, who's to say it isn't?
Yeah. Well, I agree. But the thing is, again, very subjective. There's absolutely no proof whatsoever. You've just the eyewitness statements from one adult male and who ex-RAF, albeit, and 2 children. But again, for me as an 11-year-old, I was round about my 11th or just after my 11th birthday, and for me it was so obvious that it was something alien, for want of a better word, that it was like, why don't I know about this? Why isn't it in the newspapers? Why isn't it on the television? And that's when I got, from that moment on, that's when I thought there must be more to it. It's obvious there's something to it. And that's what got me hooked.
Yeah, I mean, when we say alien, we don't actually mean extraterrestrial. We mean sort of anything that's different to us, don't we? Really?
Yeah.
That's the way I think of it, anyway. You know. So that was over 50 years ago. So, and I've been reading. I was an avid reader as a child, and then the sort of the biggest authors on. I had to get on the local bus and go out to the nearer bigger towns to find books, because there was nothing near where I was. And I then the sort of books were Jenny Randalls had just started writing it, but it was things like Donald Keyhoe, Leonard Stringfield, even Albert K. Bender, and these other names from the past, Don Wilson, Our Mysterious Spaceship Moon, and things like that. And they were all coming out then. Jacques Vallée, he was another one, who quite early on was a prolific writer. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I read all of his. And I used to keep them. And
I think you mentioned George Adamski as well, didn't you? Now, how do you take him? Do you think he was a faker, or do you believe in him? I mean, I actually believe a lot of his stories are true, but I think he may well have exaggerated a bit of it.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that we have to take into account, that he was a failed science fiction writer, and had written or attempted to write books that didn't do anything. And I think he was of the same George Adamski, Elizabeth Clara in South Africa, and they were sort of, I won't say pampering to the audience at the time, but they were. And for them, I think I'm not doubting that he may have seen something. However, I think he was exaggerating it, shall we say, to make himself more important than he actually was. You know?
You don't think he was actually taken up into spaceships and things? I mean, because some of the descriptions he gave supposedly from these flying saucers was actually quite accurate, considering that there wasn't a lot of space flight going on at the time, was there? You know.
Then the other thing as well is that where I suppose in modern times we've sort of gone down the Greys route, where previously it had been like the modern sort of Venetian type, human-like people that were sort of being reported. So,
yeah. I mean, I was talking to Kathleen Marden on I'm not sure if it was a couple of shows back when this one goes out. And she says there's quite a few different species that are actually visiting this planet. What evidence there is of that, I'm not sure, but
again,
you know, you can only go by the people that do research these things and just accept what they say. I mean, I don't accept everything I hear, obviously, but
yeah. Well, one of the things which happened to me, there were 3 things basically that happened within a short space of time. The sighting of the UFOs was one. Another one was being introduced to a spiritualist church, because I had had quite a religious upbringing. My mother and father, I'd been dedicated a Methodist. I'd been baptised Church of England. We had to go to Bible classes. We had to join the choir. My mother was, you know. Yeah. And then when I was 11 years old, we moved next door to a spiritualist church. As your parents gradually got a little bit more money under the belt, we moved into a nice semi-detached house on the edge of town, on the edge of the village. But literally 50 yards from our house was the local spiritualist church. And it just happened that some of my father's work colleagues used to go. So he was obviously invited. And in the end, we were told, because obviously you just did what your parents told you to do, we had to attend the spiritualist church. So in the end, I've been dedicated to a Methodist, baptised Church of England, and I've been a naming ceremony for spiritualism as well.
Right.
But to go back to the story, the three things. I saw the UFOs not long after we'd moved into the new house. Then I was walking by, because then I started reading about UFOs, and obviously the experiences that you have and the people you meet and the books that you read colour your decisions and your opinions at the time. And I was walking past the spiritualist church, and like this, they still do now to some extent, there's this old guy stood outside smoking a cigarette, and I didn't know him, and I'm walking past to go to see some friends, and as I walked past him, he looked up and he went, "Paul." I thought, he must know me from somewhere, I don't know him. So he says, "Come here a minute," and I walked up to him, and he got a piece of paper out of his pocket and a little pencil, and he's writing something down. And then I'm stood in front of him, and he showed me this little scrap of paper, and on the paper he'd just written the three letters, UFO. He said, "I've just been told by Spirit to show you that and to tell you you're thinking on the right lines."
Wow.
and that was it. And I hadn't said anything at this point, and it was like, oh my God, you know. So anyway, I said, "Oh, well, thank you very much," and carried on walking to my friends, and it was like, my God, how can somebody I don't even know, who doesn't even know me, that I'm into that? So that obviously there must be something to it.
That is weird. Well, the fact that you didn't know him and he didn't know you, but he mentioned UFO, that is really strange. Wow.
Yeah.
So what happened? What developed out of that?
So out of that, obviously as we get older we start going to the church, and we got introduced to different people. And one of my father used to like to think himself as a healer, and he used to do healing circles, and people used to come back to the house. So we started getting used to, I'm not saying the spiritualist way of life, but we started getting introduced to people from the church that used to sort of these little cliques, if you like. Yeah. And one of them was a group of healers. So I found out that they used to do development circles and healing circles, and as a young child, maybe just getting towards his teens and a bit geeky and whatever, it was the last thing on my radar, and I wasn't interested in spiritualism per se, you know, but they were just sort of part of my parents' life, so you just accepted it. So I would read all the time, and there weren't any books particularly on spiritualism that I were interested in, because it was all on the religious side of things. And what happened was we started to go, and because you had to attend to be named, like everything else. If you go to a church, you have to attend to be baptised or to be married, and this was no different. So we started going to the church, and this old lass, as they say in Yorkshire, this old lass used to make a beeline for me every time, and she'd say, "Paul, I want you to go and see somebody." So I said, "Yeah, fine, I don't mind." She said, "I want you to go on your own and do some healing." And I'm like, whoa, just a minute. I'm not psychic in the slightest. I don't see things, I don't feel things, I'm just a normal guy, you know. And she said, "I want you to go and see, it's Pearl." Now, for me as a 12, 13-year-old young lad, the incentive to go and see Pearl was she had a daughter who was stunning. So as a young lad, I thought, oh yeah, okay, then I'll go along with this. So she said, I want you to go and see Pearl. She's got migraine. And this lady used to suffer from quite debilitating migraines and used to be in the house 2 or 3 days at the time with the curtains closed. Right. So one of the points as a child was my father was a driver on the local bus service. So due to that, if it was around the local towns and villages, we used to have free transport. So I dutifully got on this bus and goes to see this lady who only lived maybe 5-6 miles away. Finds the house, knocks on the door. As I knocks on the door, all the curtains are closed. And this lady says, oh, you must be Paul, come in. And she just put like a high chair in the middle of a lounge. So you couldn't see, it was quite dim in the home because of all the curtains being drawn. And she closed the door. And she literally just went and sat on the chair in the middle of the room, like she expected me to do something. Now, I'd never sort of seen it before, I'd never witnessed anything like this before, but I felt this compulsion to go to her. I put my hands on her shoulders, and she said a little prayer, and I didn't say anything, I was just stood at the back of the chair. And then it was like somebody else got hold of my arms. I put one hand above her head. It was my left hand, not touching her head, but just above it. And my right hand, if somebody had been looking, I must have looked to the right side. But anyway, the other hand, my right hand, I put right straight up above me towards the ceiling. And then I felt like an electrical current coming down into my right hand, into my right palm, through and out through my left palm into her head. And it was just like somebody had turned something on and it was running through me into her. That's how it felt. Now, I didn't move, I didn't say anything because I thought, I've no idea what I'm doing. I'm just stood here looking like a whatever in this weird position, but I could feel something going through me. And I just stood there, never moved, never said anything. And then literally 1 minute, and it just stopped. And I could feel it like somebody had just turned the power off. And it stopped. And I put my hands down, and I just stood quietly a minute, and then put my hands on her shoulders. And she just turned around in the chair, and she just said, well, you certainly hide your light under a bushel, don't you? And I thought, hide your light under a bushel? I didn't even know what that meant, you know. But it was like, and she jumped up and she said, I'll make a cup of tea. And like 5 minutes later, I'm walking out the door, sort of my head in a whirlwind thinking, what was that about? You know, I had no idea. But it was, just an experience that it was like I was being used.
Yeah.
And it was really funny because when I went back to the church, which could have been a few weeks later, this old medium, this old lass came up to me and she said, well done, she says, that was an experience for you, wasn't it? And it was like she'd sort of used it as a lesson. And there's several things like that that happened throughout my life. I don't profess to be psychic in the slightest. But these things that happened, and as is normal in these sort of circumstances, no proof whatsoever.
No. Did you find your hands got very hot, Paul?
No, I can't say that they did.
Oh, right. Because I've not told this to many people, but I've actually been told that I've got healing powers. I mean, by a couple of mediums before now. I've actually tried it a couple of times. My wife Jill, she had an aching shoulder once, and I put my hands on her shoulder, and she says it took it away. So I don't disbelieve anything you say. I think there's certainly something in that. But my hands are always warm, so whether there's anything connected to it, that's why I asked that question. You know.
Yeah, I agree. As I would agree with you as well that my hands are always warm. My wife's always saying, "Oh, just put your hands on my shoulder, or put your hands on my leg, or whatever." Right.
Yeah, I just wonder if that's anything sort of to do with the healing powers. I mean, like you, I don't consider I'm psychic in any way at all. But You know, but I have been told this by a couple of people, by a couple of mediums, you've got a lot of healing power, but.
Yeah.
And I've been told to use it more, but I said, well, I'm not really that kind of way inclined. I have been to spiritist churches in the past. I don't really like to call them churches. We used to call them spiritist centres, to be honest.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sort of religious in any way, really. But I do believe in spirit, obviously, like you do.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Religion is man-made.
Yeah, and it's kind of a focus point, I think, of a lot of people. You know, you think of a God, but you're actually thinking of God as a focal point, a focus point, to focus that, you know, your energies and your thoughts. That's the way I see it, anyway. But,
yeah, the old medium at the spiritualist church. She says, you need to go and see Betty. And I went, who's Betty? Anyway, I found out, cutting a long story short, that Betty was a medium who used to run the development circles. And this is for people that want to develop to be mediums. And space people kept coming through. Now, initially they kept coming through once or twice, and she used to just push it on one side or whatever. But then once they got through and they listened to them and they did it once, and then they were coming through every time. So in a nutshell, she was told by the old fuddy-duddies at the church, if you like, that she mends her ways and she don't do that anymore. And she was ostracised from the church. And if she wants to do it how we do it, then she can come back, type of thing. So anyway, I was told to go and see this Betty. And I went to see her. I can't remember, I'd be 15, maybe 16 at the time. And I just knocked on the door. She opened the door, and straight away, I'd never met her before, didn't know her. I just found out where she lived, and she didn't know I was coming. I just knocked on the door, and it was like, hello, my name's Paul, I've been told to, whatever. And she said, hello, Paul, you've taken your time getting here. And it was like, really? And I went in, and she was telling me the story as I've just told you. And she says, they'd like to speak to you. And I went, really? So it's like, yeah, okay. So cutting a long story short, we arranged and I went back to see her, and she did this trans-mediumship thing. And there was only me and her there. She didn't have anybody else with her. There was nobody else with me. And she went into this trance, which, I mean, now I've learned how they do these things. And she started telling me things. And I was trying to trip her up, because I thought, this, you know, I mean, I was a bit unnerved, I must admit, because it was different. I could tell it wasn't her. So I'm thinking, because always you're trying to be logical and think, yeah, so I started asking, shall I say, more technical questions about UFOs that there's no way a normal old lady would know. And she started telling me the answers, and she was telling me answers, and while she's telling me the answer, how your brain and your mind's working, she started telling me the next answer before I'd said it, while I was still thinking about it. And that realisation, because what happened then, this went on for, I don't know, 10 minutes, where I never spoke, and I was just thinking things, and she was telling me the answers to what I was thinking.
Wow.
And that really, that is real. I mean, all my hair was stood on end. It was like, my God, how can she do this? This has got to be real, you know. Because I was trying to ask technical questions of how can you move like that? How can you... Because for me then, the initial sighting I'd had was still relatively fresh in my brain, you know. So it's like, how can something just stop on a dime? How can something move that quickly without acceleration? It was just immediately moving, you know, and it was like... And she's telling me how they were doing it.
Wow, what a fascinating story. Like, that's amazing.
Yeah. And I sort of came out like, sort of, my God, there's obviously a lot more to this. But unfortunately, I moved away. I started nursing when I was 16, and I got my own flat and I moved away. And as time went on, obviously, you're busy with your own life and kids and everything else and growing up. And then when I retired and got back into it, and I've made inquiries, she's already died. So, because I would have loved to have gone back to see her.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating.
One of the, if we can carry on with the paranormal, one of the other things that happened to me in a similar area geographically. I was a bit older. I'm just trying to think. Probably 10 years later, 12 years later. And I was working down the mine. I'd initially gone, I was a nurse, I've always been medical. And I had originally applied and got the job working in the medical centre for the local mine. But after, shall we say, a couple of years doing that, it gets quite boring, because unless you're doing, it's usually split fingers and things like that, where people get trapped hands and things, or broken legs where they get caught by the ropes and things underground, the metal ropes, or they were in pieces, you know, and it did tend to get a little on the boring side, so I thought,
I imagine some nasty accidents as well, though.
Oh, yeah. But a lot of the time, there wasn't a lot for you to do. So I asked to go underground, and I went with a team of road layers. And it just happened I was quite a strong, fit young lad. And there were 2 road laying teams at the mine I was at. And what we were doing, essentially, you were responsible for laying the light railway track underground as they did the new developments. So there was a fairly young couple of lads that worked together on one team. And the other team were a pair of old guys. One had just retired, and one was getting that way. So they put me, I suppose, as the brawn for this old guy's brains, if you like. So I more or less became his labourer. Oh yeah, that one there, that there, do this. But I enjoyed it. It was a good job. And we just gone through the new developments that had gone out. And what we used to do was, once they'd done the headings, we used to put the track down, and then they used to send the little mine carts down there, the tubs, and then the equipment that they'd made the headings with towards the new face were all broken up, put in the tubs, so they could clear it out, ready to put the final equipment in to start the mining. So we'd gone down, it had all gone through, everything was fine, we'd finished, and then if we'd little to do, we used to come out, turn back and walk, because sometimes you could be 4 or 5 miles from where the shaft was, where you went down the mine. So we used to come down inspecting the track and walk back out of these few miles and just make sure everything's as it should be, and just correcting things, tightening plates and pegging the track in place as we went along. Anyway, this day we'd been down, Max and I had finished, and he says, right, we'll have a break. He says, and then we'll walk out by and do some checks. So there's all piece of rolled up conveyor belting and everything else, and heavy equipment all over. So he just squat down and sort of sat at the side of the roadway, and there was a nice big piece of conveyor belting which was quite convenient for me to lay on. So I had my sandwich there. So we just laid there having 10 minutes, and as you can imagine, it's absolutely black. You cannot see. If you turn your lamp off, there's no reflected light whatsoever. You could put your hands in front of your face and you wave it about. You can't see anything. So we'd had something to eat. We just laid there quietly in the dark. And then my ears popped like a pressure wave. And then another pressure wave, much bigger. And then I could see the roadway lighting up like a ball of fire coming towards us. And I'm screaming at Max to get in because we were actually near a couple of manholes. They were just very crudely cut little manhole between the archways, the steel arches. So I'm screaming at him to get out of the way, and I'm rolling into the archway to get his self-rescue off, because we used to have a self-rescuer always that we used to wear for carbon monoxide poisoning. Well, one of the things that's always prevalent after an explosion was carbon monoxide. So you used to use this as a self-rescuer so that you could still breathe. So anyway, I'm screaming my head off at him while I'm trying to get on the floor in the bottom, make myself as small as possible in the manhole at the opposite side of the door, while I'm getting my self-rescuer out of its casing to get that in my mouth. And then I woke up and I was just laid on the belt and everything was normal. And it was like, I jumped up and he just looked at me. And I went, Max, I'm going out the pit now. And he went, what? And I said, I've just seen an explosion. And he says, don't be daft, lad. I went, Seriously. I mean, I must have been convincing because we walked through to the intake side, which is obviously, if there is an explosion, there's much less of a risk. And we walked through to the fresh air, and then we walked out the pit bottom, and we both lost an hour's pay. because we'd gone out early. But I was that positive that there was going to be an explosion. Anyway, we got out of the mine safely, nothing had happened, went to work the following day, and everything was just back as normal. However, I believe it was 1981, I'd have to check on my records, but there was the following day, there was an explosion at a mine in Glasgow, and I can't remember, but quite a few people were injured. I don't think anybody was killed. But obviously I'd got home early, and my father used to work shifts then, and he was at home, and it's like, what are you doing here at this time? And I told him the story. And then as soon as I got home the following day, he went, there you go, lad. And the news was there'd been an explosion at the mine, and it was like, I'd had a sort of, like a premonition, you know.
Yeah, like you foresaw it. That's weird.
Yeah, but for me, it was absolutely real. I was terrified that when it happened, I thought I was going to die, you know.
So you may have been seeing it from a perspective of someone that was actually involved in the real explosion.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously where you were having your sandwiches, that would creep a lot of people out anyway, wouldn't it, being in the dark like that,
yeah.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it was a local sort of mining community, but it was like very real, and again, as in the healing, it was just sort of, what can I say, it was like I was shown an example. It was like, it was a one-off, it was a sort of real life premonition. I felt it with my body and everything, and then I've never had one since.
Oh, so that was really your one of your biggest main experiences in that. So have you actually witnessed anyone else's experiences, shall I say?
I've seen another ghost of an old miner when I was down the mine on a different occasion a few years later. I was with, what happened was, again, because our job was hot and dusty, we used to go through to anybody that's worked in a mine, there's an intake and an out by where the air is sucked around the mine by the fans to keep the gases down and to keep fresh air coming down so the men can work in reasonable conditions. So where the air comes down the mine, the way that the coal goes out, then across the face, and then it goes out the mine, usually where the man riding trains were, where they used to take the men down towards the face and the workers. So that's where we used to work a lot of the time. So if we had a break, because the whole of the mine used to stop at a certain time, so everybody had a break, and then everybody would move, then the belts would start up and everybody would start working again. So everybody has the break at the same time. Well, as soon as that happened, we used to go through to the intake side where it was cool, fresh air, have our break on what we used to call the button men, the more elderly men that had been at the mines for a long time. What they used to do, because physically they often were quite poor, they used to just put them on a transfer point where coal might be transferred from one belt onto a larger belt to get it from the different faces out of the mine. So these were sort of, if you like, less physical jobs for those that weren't able, to do normal mining, but it still kept them in employment. So we used to just go through and talk to these old guys, and I'm sat there having my lunch one day, having a sandwich, and obviously you're down a mine, it's pretty dark, and we see this old deputy coming towards us, little fat guy, old helmet on, and he's shining his light up, looking at the ceiling and everything. And then about literally not 20 yards, 15 yards from where Roger and I who were sat, this old guy ducked under the belt into a heading, which is a little, maybe some of them were only like 10 yards long, but it's where they used to put all the electrical switchgear for the different districts down the mine. And they were usually painted white, and they were brightly lit. So this guy ducks under the belt, goes into there, and I thought he'd be checking, because there's usually a seal at the end of it, and they use the lamps, the miners' lamps, to check the seal and make sure there's no gas leaking from any of the old workings. Well, after he'd been under there for a couple of minutes and he hadn't come out, Roger and I were looking at each other thinking, I hope he's not had a heart attack. So we jumped up and we went to see, and there were nobody there. And we'd both seen it plain as day, because it was like, I asked him, okay, come on, what did you see? And it was like, we bounced off each other that we'd both seen the same thing. But when you're down a mine, there's nowhere for anybody to go. It's not like he was hiding around the corner, because there aren't any corners to hide behind. It was like, weird, you know.
And why would you want to anyway, you know?
Yeah. And again, at the time, we weren't particularly scared. It was afterwards as sort of the realisation dawned on you that, like, that wasn't normal, you know. So after that, I was just a bit wary about being in different places on my own and a bit more.
Yeah, you would be. I mean, I can't really think of anything worse than working down the mines, to be honest. I suppose there are worse things, but you know, it's not wouldn't be one of my first choices.
No.
I didn't like getting my hands dirty when I was in my job, so.
Yeah. But again, it was nothing scary particularly. He just looked like a normal old guy, you know.
Yeah.
So we didn't think anything of it until he didn't come back out again, and then it was like, where could he have gone?
Well, that is strange, isn't it?
Yeah.
But, Anyway, I suppose, going back to the UFO field again, you've met some interesting people. I think you've spoken to Arthur Shuttlewood.
I have, yes.
The late Arthur Shuttlewood, Bud Hopkins.
Yeah.
You know, some very interesting characters. What can you tell us about them?
Yeah. Well, Arthur, what happened was I had an uncle. Again, my parents weren't wealthy in the slightest, but we had very little money. And I used to work to buy books. And it just happened that we had, my mum's family were from Nottingham, where we were from Yorkshire. My father was from Yorkshire, my mother was from Nottingham. And a lot of her family was still down there. And one of my uncles moved up near us, and he'd been a member of a UFO group in the Midlands, which covered Nottingham. They came in one day, there's a knock on the door, and he came in and he says, I must have only been about 13, maybe 14. And he asked my father first, and he says, is Paul doing anything this weekend? My dad's like, I don't know, are you? Because I used to do a lot of cycle racing as well. And I said, no, not particularly, I've nothing on. But he says, well, I'm going down to Warminster to meet a group down there, who they've been doing a lot of research, and would you like to come? So it was like, yippee, yeah, let's go for it. So he finished work on Friday, and we literally drove down through the night on Friday night, down to Warminster, met some friends that he knew. I mean, I hadn't done bad, because I had managed to get a bit of sleep in the car where he'd been driving. And then, we went to Arthur Shuttlewood's home, and I can remember it was sort of a honey rose-coloured sort of stone cottage. Now, I'm saying it was his house. I have no idea, but I was led to believe that I was at his house. And he had this, and it was beautiful weather. It was the middle of summer.
Yeah.
And we went down, and they were all talking. There were quite a few, I mean, to me, older guys, that seemed to know what they were talking about, and the Warminster thing was quite big then. Arthur had written a couple of books, The Warminster Mystery, and he subsequently gave me one of his books. But we sat in the garden talking, and he's a lovely old guy. To me, he was just another one of the gang type of thing. But he was telling me he was in Stonehenge, and he said we go to Stonehenge quite often. And he says, do you know, he says, there was one day, he says, it had been one night, I should say. It had been a quiet night. He says, so because then you could walk right up to the stones.
Yeah, it's fenced all off now, aren't they?
Yeah. I've actually put a photograph of me at the time on that trip.
Yeah.
Because of this conversation, my uncle and I went the following day down to Stonehenge. and he took my photograph between the stones, pretending to be Samson, trying to push them apart. Yeah. But anyway, and he said, I walked down on my own, and he says, and I walked down to the hailstone, and he says, we're just watching the sky, he says, and there's nothing happening. And he says, and I rested on the hailstone, he says, and I put my head back. He says, and I put my head, as my head touched the hailstone, he says, I can only describe it as a musical note, and a blue light seemed to shine out, vertically straight up into space from the hailstone. And it was like, wow, you know, I mean, as a young kid listening to this old guy saying all this stuff, it was like, whoa.
I think we ought to explain to some of our visitors in America and that. Arthur Shuttlewood wrote a few books about the famous Warminster Thing, which was in the West Country, and Stonehenge is quite near to Warminster, so that's kind of where the connection comes in. It's
yeah. So there is still a lot of activity around that area, and Andrew Collins will tell you all about the crop circles and everything else around there. So yeah, that's a huge area for that. But anyway, on the first night we went to Clay Hill, and we did Skywatch on Clay Hill, and then on the second night we went to Cradle Hill and did Skywatch at Cradle Hill, and we saw a few sort of anomalous lights, shall we say. Nothing definitive, but odd lights that were unexplainable at the time.
I know they do regular Skywatches there, don't they?
Yes, they do.
A friend of mine, Steve Wills, I think he's involved in quite a few of the Skywatches there every week. I need to get him on the show at some point.
So that was my meeting with Arthur Shuttlewood.
That's that's actually quite a feather in your cap, actually, isn't it? So I don't think he's well known sort of worldwide, but in the UK in the UFO field, he's very the books are very well known, and probably one of the earliest books I read as well.
Oh yeah.
You know. What about Bud? What about Bud Hopkins? Your experiences with him?
Well, as I got later in life and had a bit more time, I joined Bufora, and used to enjoy going to the conferences. And as it happened, got reintroduced, shall we say, to Philip, Mr. Mantle, who at the time then only lived about maybe 5 miles away. So I dare say it's Philip's fault that I've sort of spurred me on and got me back into it deeper than I would have done normally. But it was really interesting, and I became an investigator for them. I had quite a few interesting cases, but what was really interesting from my point of view was meeting the speakers at their annual conference, which was held then initially at Sheffield Library, and then at the university. And it was fabulous. Some lovely people. I met Linda Moulton Howe, Paul Daveroux, Bud Hopkins, and I was even there helping with security, can you believe, when they showed the alien autopsy film for the first time.
Right, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah. So, I can't say that, please forgive me, people of Bufora, but it was like a dinosaur at the time where it lumbered along, and it was some excellent people in it. But it sort of, as time went on for me, because I was in the army, and then I left the army, and then I went to be a paramedic, and sort of learning my skills as a paramedic became more paramount. So in the end I had to let Bufora go, and it's only more recently as I've retired that I've taken up the baton again and for the field of ufology.
Yeah. Well, I think back then it was a little bit difficult, wasn't it? Because all you had really was like a little printed pamphlet or something that you could send out to people. Like today, you've got internet sites and things. You can make up websites and all sorts of stuff to spread the word easier. And I think a lot of the old UFO clubs or societies, as you like, back then suffered from that, didn't they? That you couldn't really spread the word too much, and you'd have like small groups and,
well, communication then isn't what we have now.
No, I mean, someone had to be dedicated to sit there and type it all out and have all the facts and figures correct, and you know, and at a cost of the paper and the typing and the time and everything else.
Yeah, I did a really good investigation for Bufora in 1995, an abduction of 4 adults in one of the West Yorkshire towns.
All right.
And that was a fascinating investigation, shall we say. And I was pleased, can we say, that Philip, who's director of investigation, allowed me to pursue it and carry it through. But yeah, very, very odd, and remains unexplained. Well, no, I can now go so far as to say it wasn't unexplained. They were abducted. Period.
Really?
End of story.
Right. So you're absolutely convinced that's what happened. All right.
Yeah.
Could you tell us that story?
Yeah. It was two adults in their early 20s. The girls were cousins, I believe, and it was one was a husband and one was a boyfriend. But they lived maybe 500, 600 yards apart, and they were quite high up. It was above the hills in West Yorkshire, and they'd gone down to have a barbecue. It was in July 1995, and they had gone to have a barbecue, put the boys to bed. The boys had got a babysitter. They had 2 small boys, and they were just having the barbecue. But retrospectively, the cousin and the boyfriend refused to talk to anybody. So all my investigation seemed to be rested really on the husband and wife of the 2 boys, right, who'd come to their house. But they told me some of the things which the other couple had said. And they said it was strange, it was an odd feeling to start with. On the night they said there was something not right. He said, I put glasses down. He said, I'd be having a beer. He says, and I put the glass down. He says, and then when I went to pick it up, and I thought I'd put it down, it was somewhere else. And there were things like that happening. And I'll just skip forward a little bit, but going back to what you said earlier, was when we were writing up afterwards, I taped all the interviews, and then my wife transcribed it all and wrote it all out, and then we typed it up. So everything was done with the pen and paper as it was at the time. Like I went back afterwards with photographs, taking photographs from the site of where the UFO appeared from and where it disappeared to. But he said what happened was that his normal recollection was that it was very odd. They were in the back garden, which was surrounded by a tall green privet hedge, so it was quite screened off from anywhere else. It was a semi-detached house, and he said, I can remember seeing the wall being sort of light shining on it. He says, I can remember seeing a light in the distance. He says, and then the next normal recollection is it was dark. Suddenly it was like, how's it got dark that quick? And his wife, she said, I can remember thinking, what's that above my head? She was the same way, there were odd things happening. And she said, I can remember thinking, what's that? She says, and there was something metal above her head. And she says, it was so low that I felt I could jump up and touch it. Anyway, to move on, they didn't have any normal recollection, except the wife was petrified of the night and looking out the window. She had to close the curtains afterwards. On one occasion, they'd gone back and they said to the cousins, and they said, we need to report this to somebody. There's more to this than we can normally remember. And they were arguing about that. And then they reported it to, forgive me, I can't remember off the top of my head, David. But obviously not very good, because when we got there, they they took my wife and I and said, they told us that they'll be coming back and they'll come for us again. And this poor woman we're terrified, and I thought, that's the last thing she wants to know.
Yeah.
But there were all sorts of other psychic things happen. She said I could tell, like when they were near, and she said on one occasion a ball of light appeared in the corner of the lounge, like it was just listening to us and watching us. On another occasion, they'd been to the cousins to say, like, we're going to report it, we're going to go to somebody. And she said as we walked back, there was a children's play area. And she says there were these black children at the bottom of the play area. And she says, I don't know why. She said, but it was like a nightmare. She says, I was absolutely terrified of them. She says, you know, like when you're having a nightmare and you're trying to run away from something and your body doesn't run properly. She says it was like that. And she wouldn't go there on a night after that. And then on another, some other thing that went on from that was that the husband had suffered really severe psoriasis. So much so that he used to go from where he was, he'd been referred to a consultant in Leeds because they couldn't do anything for him locally. And it was sort of there monthly or every 3 months he had to travel into Leeds for this consultant to have a look at him and see what was happening, you know. And after the abduction, the psoriasis completely cleared up and I didn't have a problem with it ever again.
Oh.
And this guy had suffered with it quite badly for years.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So it's just that's some of the things. I mean, one of the things which you said, which I think was quite a way of describing it, was his memory was all. He says, if you can imagine your normal memory as a videotape, he says, and then cut it up into segments, and then put it back, but some of them are in the wrong order and some of them are missing completely. He says that's what that night is like.
Right.
So,
and do you know if they were visited again, or did you not? Or wasn't it followed up on?
Well, to be fair, I just put a full report into Bufora. I interviewed them and transcribed that. I took lots of photographs and went back on 3 occasions. And then I left sort of my file, because I did a proper thick file with it, that I then left with Bufora. But after that I left to do my paramedic course, so everything for me I just let go,
Probably somebody else must have taken it over, I suppose, or maybe they didn't bother to follow it up. Yeah, it's a shame.
Yeah.
But, because it'd be nice to find out, you know, if something else happened after that.
Yeah, it would. I'd like to know.
Yeah.
But
Anyway, would Philip know, I wonder?
He may do, and I will be seeing him when we get back.
Yeah.
But again, as Philip's no longer involved with Bufora, though he was director investigations at the time, he may know something.
Yeah, he may well.
So there's a question to ask. And again, I'm going back again to your early question, Bud Hopkins. What a lovely man.
Yeah, I've heard that. I mean, unfortunately, I never got the chance to meet him myself, but I've heard that he was a lovely man, you know.
Yeah. One of the things that I did eventually with Buford was I used to help Gloria and a few of the others, Philip, like getting the speakers ready, and then getting them sort of to the stage and back, and making sure they were okay, really. And it just worked out that when Bud was there that year, he finished and I took him up to get him some lunch. So I finished up, just sat with Bud having lunch with him. And it couldn't have been nicer.
Oh, nice, yeah, that's lovely.
Yeah. So I can't quite say that's a claim to fame, but I was just in the right place at the right time.
Well, yeah, it's just the way it happens sometimes, isn't it? You know, it's...
Yeah.
Anyway, I was going to ask you about the original Alien Autopsy video when it was first screened. How was it taken by people? Was everyone believing it, or...?
Well, this is it. When it was first shown, can I say, there were people like Dave Clark there who were, forgive me Dave, but belligerently against it.
Yeah.
And obviously, in hindsight, it was quite correct.
Yeah, we're talking about Dr. David Clark, not the Dave Clark 5 Dave Clark.
No, that we're talking Dr. David Clark, yeah. And then there were others that were going, I believe, So, yeah, you got people obviously on both sides of the fence. But at the time it was big news. It was a
I think a lot of us were taken in by it,
Yeah.
I had the old VHS tape at the time, and then I think I ended up getting it on DVD later, still wondering if it was true or not. And obviously...
the story...
Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, the story that we were led to believe with it at the time, as Philip has gone over it quite well, was, it was made quite believable.
Oh, absolutely. Spiros, who actually produced it all, Spiros Bellaris we're talking about, he's been on the show. He's an absolute genius, actually, the way he figured out the questions people would ask about it. And he sort of foresaw the questions that would be asked and sort of got around it and made sure that whatever was asked, that it would be able to be answered, you know what I mean? Because things like the curly telephone wire, for instance, as a small instance, people would say, they didn't have that curly telephone wire. Oh, yes, they did. Things like that.
Actually, yeah. So, it's something that little sort of highlights in your life that you were there at the time. And sort of moving forward to modern times, I think now I've retired and I'm sort of getting back into it again and
soaking up the sun in Florida.
Yeah, I know, but just being able to go to the conferences again. I live quite close to Philip, so I can see him on occasion.
Yeah.
We do, although Philip and I do have different opinions on things, we still remain good friends and we can still talk about things.
It's a bit like me. I because of my working career, I could never go to conferences and things. It's only since I've retired that I was an avid reader of UFO books and the paranormal and everything else. And one or two people sort of wondered why I suddenly appeared. It's only the fact that I actually moved to Suffolk, and suddenly got immersed in the RFI, the Rendlesham Forest incident a little bit. But, it's kind of, because people have been saying, I just appeared out of nowhere, but really, I kind of did, but I didn't, because I was sort of always around, but never been out to go to conferences,
Yeah. Well, I've had quite a few sightings from where I am. I live just outside Leeds now, which is a huge urban sprawl, and you get a lot of background light, a lot of interference, so you can't. The night sky is not very good at all, really. But even there, I've had some excellent sightings. I have put them. I do have a Facebook page called It's the Real Story, and I put some of my photographs. I've taken 2 daylight photographs, both with witnesses, and one I took an 18-second video at night. I think that was 2 years ago, just before I finished work, and that was a UFO that I used to, because I did 12-hour shifts and you'd be sat in an office for 12 hours. So when I had a break, I used to make a point of getting up and going for a walk, whatever time it was. And you get to know the flight paths coming into Leeds Bradford. And I'd sort of go out, even if it were 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. Well, the last aircraft flying to Leeds Bradford, it's about 1 o'clock in the morning. There are a few cargo aircraft after that. But you get to know them all. Anyway, I'm walking back in, and I saw reasonably clear nights, some low cloud, big full moon in the sky, and this was October 17, and a brilliant white, what looked initially, what I thought was an aircraft, came out of the cloud and got slightly brighter, as it would going into clearer air. And I thought it was its landing lights coming towards me. Except there didn't appear to be any wing strobes, how you get the lights on the end of the wings. And it just came out, and then it was stationary, and I thought, that's a bit peculiar. Even if the wind's going against it, they move quicker than that. So I got my phone out, and I took a video for 18 seconds. There were no noise, just these obscure lights with a bit of red and green flashing in it. And then it moved sideways back into the cloud, and I didn't see it again. So I never heard anything. There were no rotation, no noise, no strobe lighting, as it were, and no other aircraft around. And part of my job at the time, I used to look after the Yorkshire Air Ambulance, so I knew when they'd gone out and when they were in. And obviously we used to find out about the police helicopter as well. So I knew that both the police helicopter and our helicopter were on the ground and they were not in plane. So that was a strange one. But it's nice to have some video and photographic confirmation of these things.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that site you mentioned, It's the Real Story. I'll actually put a shortcut to that on my Paranormal Dimensions page for Facebook. So anyone sort of hearing this and wants to follow it up can actually find you. But before we sort of pack up, you've got you've written a book, haven't you, Paul? Or more?
I have, yes. Called the Real Story.
Oh, right.
And I wrote it because you do get, I mean, as has just been proved with the Calvin Parker story.
Yeah.
Now, I'm nothing against that whatsoever, but it's just one incident in the world of ufology.
Oh, yeah.
Now, this is going on all the time, 365 days a year, all over the world, and there are lots of stories. So I'm not one of these that thinks, well, it could have been a lighthouse shining through the trees. It could have been flares off a military exercise. No, I'm not going to swear, but rubbish. They did see something odd. It's like when I was sat with my father and my brother, it was so obvious that it was something alien.
Yeah.
It's like, and I think this, what can I say, this climate that the media have of debunking and sort of tongue-in-cheek comedic sort of attitude towards things.
As they've been programmed to do by the original CIA things back in the late 40s, wasn't it, really?
Yeah, and it still goes on today. And I think it's a shame because there are people, it's like one of my colleagues at work, he came to me one shift and he said, Paul, I've seen something. And I said, have you really seen something? And he went, yeah. And it was like, and he said, previously he wouldn't have ever said anything, you know.
Yeah, I know what you mean. So that's interesting. So, is that the only book you've written, Paul?
At the moment, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, come on,
that's interesting.
That took me 50 years.
Oh, right, yeah. I mean, is it available on Amazon?
It is available on Amazon, called The Real Story, and it's available in paperback or as an e-book.
Excellent.
And if we go to the show, I will have some hard copies of the paperback, a revised edition which is slightly improved, and I'll have some hard copies of that paperback edition with me.
Right, put one aside for me, I'll have one. If I don't get one before that, because I'm going to have to look this up now. But anyway, Paul, it's been a lovely speaking to you. I don't want to drag you away from the sunshine too much, because I know everybody out there is that Paul's on holiday in Florida, so he's been kind enough to put an hour aside to come and talk to us. But and you'll be going for dinner in a minute, I understand.
Ah, well, yeah, but that's fine. There's no rush whatsoever.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I mean, if you've got anything else you want to tell us, but like sort of any links I can put on the page.
Just another example I'll give you very briefly. Yeah. In 2015, one of our neighbours had a little baby, like people do, brought it, and they're all sat in our back garden having a cup of tea and cooing over the baby like ladies do. I was entertaining the elder brother, who was 3 at the time, and he was into birds. So we were sat, or rather we were laid on our backs in the back garden on a little picnic mat, looking at the sky, pointing out aeroplanes and birds. Right?
Yeah.
Then I'm sort of looking between the houses, and I see a flash in the sky, and something appeared. And at first I thought I'd just seen an aeroplane turning as it goes into Leeds Bradford Airport. But what I actually saw was a ball, silvery bright ball, and it was like, whoa, and I jumped up, and it was just stationary. It looked very high and a very long way off. And if you can imagine like a glitter ball or something off a Christmas decoration, it was like that, but it was huge, but a long, long way away. So I looked at it and I went, Eve, I moved over at the side of our house so I could get it lined up so I could see it wasn't moving or if it was. And again, no strobe lighting, it wasn't turning, it wasn't moving, it was perfectly stationary. Wasn't getting larger or smaller. So I shouted at my wife, just like as nicely as I could, which wasn't very nice, because when you're sort of panicking and thinking, my God, you need to see this. So she came over, and then the other two ladies who were with us, there were 5 adults altogether, and we all saw it, and we all had insight probably for a good 5, 6, even 7 minutes. I even had time, I always keep binoculars in my conservatory at the side of me. I went in, got my binoculars, and to be fair, it didn't look any different whatsoever. It just looked slightly clearer and slightly larger, but no different. And we watched it until it sort of moved slightly towards us, then remained stationary again, and then it moved off west until it just disappeared in the distance. But again, throughout, no noise, no flashing, no rotation, just a ball of light. And it moved against the prevailing wind. We'd got 5 adults, and then afterwards, it was like, we were sat there, 5 of us with mobile phones. I'd got 2 tablets, I'd got cameras, and not one of us thought to take a picture. And I said, I bet that's some sort of subliminal like thing where I believe that they can zoom in on you, if for want of a better word, and influence how you think. And why would 5 adults not take a photograph when for 4 of them it was the first time they'd seen something that was unexplained, for want of a better term.
Yeah.
And it was like, and my wife sort of agreed with me and agreed with the conclusion that, yeah, why didn't we take a photograph? It
just made it slip your mind, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, some subliminal coercion that, no, that's not going to happen.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, well, nice little epilogue there we had from you there, Paul. That's very good.
Yeah.
But if anyone wants to get in touch with you, can they get in touch with you, or do you?
Yeah.
Yeah. Have you got an email address or whatever?
Yeah. It's paul.ascough, ASCOUGH 57. paul.ascough57 at gmail.com.
Lovely. I'll put that on the page anyway, and hopefully I'll be seeing you, because you'll be speaking at the OLM conference next year as well, won't you?
I am, yes. And if anybody wants to get in touch through because I've put lots of posts on the Facebook page, It's the Real Story, and they can get in touch with me through Facebook at any time.
Yeah, I'll put that link on the page as well to make sure that if anyone wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's been very interesting, Paul. Thank you for coming on, and thank you for sparing the time out of your busy schedule of your holiday.
No, just thank you for having me anytime, David.
No, it's I'm looking forward to speaking to you properly, well, if not before next September. Maybe at Awakening in Manchester. I'm not sure if I'm going yet, but you never know. I usually change my mind halfway through the year, but there you go. But
well, if I'm not on holiday, I will be there.
Well, it's all right for some, isn't it? Anyway, Paul, thanks very much. I'll say goodbye to you now. If you'd like to say goodbye to everyone,
you're welcome. Right, thank you for listening, everybody.
Yeah, it's been great pleasure having you on, Paul. Thank you very much. And you've been listening to...
You're welcome.
That's right. And you've been listening to the Paranormal UK Radio Network, the Paranormal Dimensions. I'm David Young, and thank you for listening. Speak to you next week. Bye-bye.
Paranormal Dimensions is as bright and powerful as our celestial star, the sun. And although it's expending thousands of pounds of energy every minute of the day, have no fear. There's plenty left.
Paranormal Dimensions is a regular feature on Mondays on the Paranormal UK radio network.